What's up, guys? Koma here, and today we're going to talk about the Splitgate timeline. Now, a few notes when it comes down to the Splitgate timeline before we start jumping into anything. While the Splitgate universe seems vast, there's not much we know about it from the eras before the SSL, but we can piece together some sort of rough timeline. This timeline does contain details from each maps, such as dates of Eden and Zenith, and a few details of the comics that we should at least take note of. And I did get a few hints from Endo. Now, I do also want to clarify that some things are from Endo, but this does not consist of anything that he did in his unofficial lore back 4 years ago. And Indo isn't specifically a writer and, do any of this background lore stuff for Splitgate for 1047 as a whole. Starting off in the Tok'ran and early Earth era, which has no known beginning in terms of date, but ends, to me at least, around 2167, is that the Tok'ran simply existed. It is unknown if humanity had any sort of interactions with the Tok'ran and how old the Tok'ran are, but we at least know they exist. Around this time, they would also learn how to create perolium, Prolium and portals. This is supported by the large amount, like ancient portals that are connected to the onslaught maps. Because we can assume that they created them and these structures have stood for probably millenniums, give or take. Somehow the Tok'ran would have gone extinct or simply disappeared for some unknown reason. As the structures they've left behind have statues in their honor, but some have been decayed over time or simply overgrown. The Sanctum would have been the first Tok'ran structure discovered for one major reason. It's actually on Earth. Endo did toss me a small bone here, and as I stated, it confused me on why the Sanctum was on Earth because I initially figured that the Sanctum would be on the Tok'ran homeworld. However, Endo said, "Who says it was originally from Earth?" followed by, "It's there now, yes." This implies that perhaps the Sanctum is a bigger location of significance to the Tok'ran, so significant, in fact, that they wanted a place to keep it safe. However, this gives more questions than answers, and we will have to theorize at a later date. By this time, it's safe to say that humanity had discovered the sanctum, and by that logic, Perolium, and reverse engineered the massive portals between worlds. Humanity would then be able to go beyond the stars to colonize other planets and moons. This would mean that Mars and Venus would eventually be colonized, and the foundations of the three factions would begin to show up. So, Eros, Meridian, and Sabrask. Eventually, this would lead to the original Splitgate 1 games. So, this is kind of the period where Splitgate 1 actually began to kind of show its roots. And while it isn't part of the SSL, this is kind of where it got its humble beginnings from. Keep in mind, this is also a big gray area for the Splitgate lore, as we don't know what time period a lot of the SG1 stuff takes place or what happens during this time. Forgon and Abyss are two other noteworthy locations of Tok'ran significance. Both were used as arenas in SG1, and Indo used Forgon to tease Sanctum's release. Abyss possibly holds some sort of religious significance to the Tok'ran, as it doesn't seem to be any major portal locations on the map, unlike Forgon's background. At some point, a wall from the sanctum is excavated and transported to eventually be put into Eden. We have speculated that Eden is located on Venus and is largely associated with the Meridian faction. It's unknown if this wall came from the sanctum we see in game, but it specifies the inner sanctum, so perhaps we're able to go deeper in the sanctum one way or another. Now, we finally get our first date, which is roughly 2100. A member of the Fume family obtains and adds a large urn to the family collection. The large urn is noted to hold perolium, the exact thing the SSL and humanity use to make portal walls, power portals, and even weapons. For the pre SSL era, which is 2168 to 2270, in 2168, Spectre designed Meridian's official gear and supplies, setting the standard for ace gear for centuries. In 2180, Mira's gear was designed by the executive. Now, I do want to put the note here is a strange issue is that this would mean Mira is roughly 90 years old during the events of Splitgate 2's kind of story. Perhaps the issue with a lot of Mira's age is probably just the way that time is relative. So basically, during an experiment, which you can search up, called I apologize if I butcher this, the Halafi Keating experiment in 1971 displayed how Earth's gravity affected time differently than being elsewhere. So the further you get away from Earth, the difference in time, how time is kind of relative. So this could result in Mira's age being different because, of course, when you're traveling out in space, you're in a lot of cryo sleep and you're going through light speed and everything like this, which would inevitably cause a lot of aging and a whole lot more other uh, factors go into everything. In 2232, an impact event occurs and Noom Fume obtains relics to add to their family collection. While it is mentioned Forgon is somehow linked to this event, it is unknown what exactly it is and how Forgon was affected, besides now being called an archaeology survey. The event is also mentioned on Ozone, stating that the event, quote, influenced every aspect of Soul society. In 2265, the BFB was designed by Meridian for the Eros faction. It was inevitably taken by Meridian ace by Sato after she defeated Eros ace Ricky Panache. While it was unknown when it started, Project Takran would eventually be created, utilizing Takran relics within the center core of Venus to eventually be constructed into the cybernetic system for Meridian. Now, I don't know what it's being used for, and I don't know how they utilize it, but you can at least walk around in the map core and you can go take a look around a lot of the different details they have there, and you can see a lot of areas where it says Takran Mind and Project Takran. Moving on, the Splitgate games would be created by Eros around 2260. It is noted that an ace named Stanley Ford would be MVP of 2263, 2264, and 2265. This is mostly the starting foundation of Eros, but also whenever the Splitgate games started to get more popularized as a sport. The SSL's foundation in 2271 through 2281. In 2271, the Soul Splitgate League was founded from the early members of Eros. While largely uncanon, the Rhinoc comic mentions that during this time there was no Sabrask and Meridian, so all players were labeled as Eros. At some point, Sabrask and Meridian would be created to revolutionize the SSL going forward. In 2271, the Meridian ace FaZe, who was a rookie at the time, would utilize a Helios and a Synapse to score the first kill in an interfaction match sanctioned by the SSL. This is the first match it seems ever played by more than the Eros faction. The Helios and first Synapse would emptied magazine were saved and then displayed on Zenith. In years 2267, 2279, and 2281, Eros would take the SSL Faction Cup and be crowned champions. This overall implies that perhaps before the 2282 seasons, factions only represented themselves as a faction, much like how the Olympics, when a member of the USA represents the entire nation of the US. Interestingly enough, there is no proof of Sabrask or Meridian winning between these years, so it is unknown who won between the years. Moving into the present, which is 2282, Soul Splitgate Academy was created within 2282. While this academy looks vastly different from the academy in Bolt's comics, many images display Bolt and Mira, but also consist of statues of Dart. In 2282, the plasma tech that the Phasma utilizes was actually created. The exact model and prototype was tested and approved by the Meridian Ace Proto and is put on a display in Zenith. As the season of 2282 begins, eyes are placed on Bolt, Dart, and popular hotshots like Adaro and Nebula, but also battle tested veterans like Oni. Adoro would eventually recruit the help of Rhinoc, Bolt, and Mira to win the Splitgate Cup. Since the team's creation, they've become the new MVPs of the SSL in the year 2282. Now, overall, this is kind of where the Splitgate timeline kind of becomes to a standstill. There's not much other details I can put in between, all the other years that we have. There's still a lot of jumps between dates, and I wish I had more dates, but unfortunately, that is something they'll have to expand on later on. Now, when it comes to 1047 expanding lore, I'm not entirely sure how they're going to do it, but I would assume they're going to continue to give us little map details and hints to eventually then expand on it much more at a later date. Now, this is something that is very much so a future 1047 thing, as I talked to Indo about it, and they really have no way to currently do it. But at a later date, we will probably see more. But for the time being, that is Splitgate's timeline from, at least as far as I know, from the early or Takran era to the present day. Everything can be found in game. A few things, of course, I took from comics, but overall, at the end of the day, I'm just theorizing and connecting most of the dots as the best I can. So I hope this video was informative and fun because I know a lot of people have been very interested in the Splitgate lore, and I just wanted to make it short, precise, and yeah. So if you guys found it interesting and informative, you guys can like, share, subscribe, and maybe I'll do some more, lore stuff if you guys are interested. So I'll catch you guys in the next video. Adios.